Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Judy, could you please introduce yourself, your first name, last name, position, and the name of organization?
Hi, good morning. My name is Judy Grainger. I'm Vice President of Strategic Growth for United Cerebral Palsy Heartland, based out of St. Louis, Missouri.
Mhm. Could you please tell us about your career way? How did you choose your profession, and what does you attract in it?
I started in the field of disability when I was in college. I had the opportunity of financial aid, what they call here in the United States, work study programs. So, college students were basically farmed out in lieu of tuition. And I had the opportunity to work in an agency that provided facility based sheltered work. And I just really fell in love. At the time, I was a history major and was going to in pre law. And so I really changed gears, then turned direction to special education. And I have been a passionate advocate ever since.
Thank you. It's really interesting. And how is the issue of employment of people with disabilities resolving in the United States for today? How it regulated in law? Is there any financial support for this direction provided by government, business, or other organization?
So this is kind of where my history major really shines. In the United States, I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson about just disabilities and affirmative rights actions through our history. But today unemployment for people with disabilities is still a challenge. But our foundation of our country and our laws, as well as our Constitution, protects the rights of all individuals, including those with disabilities. Disability rights really began with the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and it granted all citizens natural or naturalized the right to equal protections under the laws. And so President Kennedy in 1964 really pushed through. I think he was passed by then, but had started the Civil Rights Act. If you're not familiar with that, that was really to help people who were African American get the rights and honors of being a true American citizen. And then that follows to the Rehabilitation Acts of 1973, and that really set up and started our United States vocational rehabilitation programs, and that is federally funded programs that help individuals who have significant barriers to work, such as a disability, get the funds needed to get the supports that they need to come to work. And so then in 1990, President Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that really brought individuals with disabilities into the fold of it's against the law to discriminate against someone based on their disability. So that covers employment, housing, transportation, and access to public buildings. So you really begin to see a shift in the United States, really helping people with disabilities become included in their communities.
What about employment support programs which implemented directly in your organization? Which is it?
So in the state of Missouri, most agencies such as mine, we follow what they call the supported employment model, which we partner and are a vendor to our state vocational rehabilitation program. And that model is just based on we train once the person is on the job versus a person training to get a job. And so that's the model that we follow.
Mhm. How do you think, what are the main barriers of providing work for people with disabilities?
In my opinion, I think still the attitudinal barriers of our society, who feel that someone with a disability isn't capable of work. Another issue that I see, our school systems are driven to be deficit programs where they are highlighting what a child can't do in order for them to get school services, which really is not in the best interest of the child, or when they become adult, when they just keep hearing those deficits that they have. And again, one of the final things that I would say is transportation. Even though we have a strong transportation systems in some of our urban cities, many of our rural cities, if a person can't drive, then it's hard for them to get to work.
Mhm. And the employers ready for employment of people with disabilities? What kind of support measures exist for such employers?
So employers receive the benefits through our federal program of vocational rehabilitation. So they have access to agencies such as mine, who can assist with, reasonable accommodation, who can assist with training and retention of an individual who has a disability, and on-the-job training. Those are another program that they can receive.
Do they have some money support?
No, there's no direct payment to an employer. Well, I should say
Uh-huh.
they're tax credits is what they call them. So a person, they can get a tax credit for a number of, maybe I think it's maybe a year, if they hire someone who meets the qualification, and receiving vocational rehabilitation is one of the qualifications.
Mm-hmm. What kind of sanctions, if any, exist, are applied to companies that don't have employers with disabilities as a member of a company?
So in the United States, we have what they call the Equal Opportunity Commission, EEOC, and that is our government body that monitors and makes sure that companies are doing fair labor practices, hiring fairly, not discriminating based on disability, sex, age, gender, all of those things. And then most recently, our government amended the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and added a section requiring any federal contractor or anyone receiving federal funds, and a financial amount, set benchmarks for hiring practices for individuals with disabilities. And that wasn't just for entry-level positions, but positions all throughout every level of the organization. And so, that affected many businesses, large businesses, health centers became under this new federal law, which really has advanced employment in the United States.
Should the employers create special working conditions for people with disability, or it should be made by vocational rehabilitation system? How it works?
So they partner with vocational rehabilitation. I think if the accommodation for a person creates a financial hardship, then our vocational rehabilitation program will either pay half the cost or will supplement. If it's something that the person with the disability, if they leave that job, can take with them, then of course they would buy that. They would help buy that for the person. For example, there was a receptionist who we worked with in the past who needed a height raising and lowering desk. This is before they became very popular as standing desks today. But the organization that hired her, the business, paid half, and vocational rehabilitation paid half. I think now, because standing desks are so commonplace, and I don't know that it would have been a hardship now versus the way it was 7 years ago. So they were also more expensive 7 years ago. So VR does help. And then agencies like ours, do go in and will provide tips or suggestions for accommodation at the time of placement.
Mm-hmm. And again, about the problems, is there such a problem as the low level of motivation and qualifications of people with disability in the United States?
Yes, there's definitely a low level. We have lost a lot of our skills and trades as a country, and so skills trainings are really needed. That's construction, manufacturing, healthcare is growing and growing as the day. Better pay, this results in better pay and better benefits, and that's getting more people interested in employment. Um, Not quite yet in the pandemic, but we're planning for those things.
Mm-hmm. What financial support is provided for unemployed people with disabilities, and do they lose this support in case of employment?
So a person on a disability receives a check from the government, a monthly income based on their disability. And then they also are provided government health insurance. And so depends upon really their need and ability to work full time. In the United States, we have benefits planners, people who are certified by our Social Security Administration. That's who pays those funds to really make sure a person understands the risks of working and how working would affect their benefits.
Mm-hmm. Is there any classification of professions for specific form of disability? What are the most popular professional areas for people with disabilities?
Um, Not that I'm aware of. This will kind of go back to the skills training answer. Many individuals with disabilities are offered entry level positions in food or housekeeping, janitorial, bagging groceries at a grocery store. And so that's really where you see the need for skills training, as well as, the response of our government and the 503 amendment to the Rehab Act is that, we want to see people with disabilities in all levels of a company, not just the entry, janitorial crew.
The labor market seems to create consistently new, unusual jobs, which are often called a dream job. For example, an island caretaker or sofa tester. Maybe you remember some cases where a person with disabilities has got such an unusual job place.
Yeah, so there's that. We don't have a candy factory here in the St. Louis side of our state of Missouri, but there's a candy manufacturer on the other side. So someone, being selected to be a candy tester is quite a unique and interesting job. I'm sure they get sick of it, but I would also think, maybe an ice cream tester would be fun too. But yeah,
Yeah, also like
yeah,
this profession.
yeah, exactly.
And Russia is currently actively developing such direction as social entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
Do you know any successful examples of social entrepreneurship involving people with disabilities?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet a young man from Kansas City, or not Kansas City, but Kansas, and he had he developed a company called Poppin' Joe's Kettle Corn. And I don't know if you've ever had kettle corn, but kettle corn is kind of a salty sweet. They kind of pour sugar in the popcorn as it's popping. But Poppin' Joe, he started, he is someone who he was on our Medicaid waiver supports, meaning he had, state funded support coming into his home and helping him as well as work. And so he kind of started, making kettle corn at craft fairs and such. And now he's carried by grocers and Walmart throughout the nation to where he's off government support. He's got great popcorn. He's got a great message. And he just works a little hard out and he's doing a great job.
If you could compare the situation with employment now and 10 years ago, would you see any differences, and what are they?
I definitely do. There's been laws that have come into place. There's new public service commercials. I think, every time that there is, kind of a social revolution in the United States, such as the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, they envelop and also bring along the disability movement. I'm starting my Christmas shopping for my nieces and nephews, and I see just a more inclusive environment. I'm at the store and I'm looking at Barbie, and there's a Barbie, who, has as an amputee, or there's a Barbie on the shelf, who uses a wheelchair, and that is something I would have never seen, a year ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. So, um, if that answers your question, it's becoming a more pleasant world.
Mm-hmm. Um, and maybe you know about the experience in this field of other countries for employment. Maybe do they have any successful practices that you don't have yet?
I am not aware. I hope to hear some with your conference. So I guess starting tomorrow for you, or in the morning for you.
Okay, you will start from Russia.
Yes, I'll start learning from you. Yes.
Uh-huh. Um, and finally, question, what are the three most important components that are not implemented for now but could solve successfully the problem of employment of people with disabilities?
I think, the TV commercials and, toys and schools keeps pushing for inclusion, will help lower the attitudinal barriers that we find in our society. I really wish they would change how they fund special education programs in our schools, so that a child's needs or deficits weren't so heavily focused on. And then in the United States, accessible transportation, really ramping up accessible Uber would be wonderful. I know, as far as my organization, we have accessible vehicles that are sitting on a parking lot, more than they're driven. And, if we could somehow become one of those pilot sites for, Uber, then that would really be wonderful. But, accessible Uber is only, to my knowledge, available in a few cities. So, but that doesn't help your rural um, participants. So that's where I would like to focus.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for interview. We finished with necessary question, and if you don't mind, I want to ask some additional questions.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really interested about you have a lot of organizations in the United States that help people with disabilities in every university, college, and non-profit organization. How you collaborated? Maybe you have some collaboration between organization.
I think it all stems from the federal government and
Mhm.
the base laws that are in place. So it's, I think as a disability specialist in the United States, like if I'm helping a college student, I know there's an accessibility person in a university. So I prompt that person, find your resource, find out who that person is. And so, that's, because there are so many resources and so many, every angle of government and education is there's supposed to be a mechanism for inclusion. And so we just help the individual one at a time, help them advocate and learn how to find their own resources.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to ask about statistics. Which percent of people with disability who can walk now really walk in the United States? In Russia, it's about 27%.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Uh-huh.
I know it's a struggle in the United States that, we are, so Missouri is an employment first. I don't know if you've heard that term, the employment first. And so, not like in Missouri, we don't have an employment first law. We just have an employment first initiative. And so that means that a person who priority should be given to those programs that want to work. And so in Missouri, we are out of the 50 states at like 46. So as good as we think we're doing, we're not doing good enough. I see the states who have an employment first law really have good programming, have people, involved in programs that are going to work. And so that's kind of where I would say it's different for every state in the United States, and Missouri is not high ranking.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I forgot to mention is there is, I don't know if you've heard or anybody has shared with you what they call Disability In,
Yeah,
but that, yeah, you're aware of that. So
just
that
about this.
business-led organization. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, that is probably one of the strongest, kind of business-led disability initiative that, service providers such as myself and businesses kind of where we come to meet.
It's not profit organization,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And how we find the money for these activities? They have the government support or
So,
Mhm.
it all, a lot of the companies, the big companies are required through the amendment to the Rehab Act, the 503,
Mhm.
to have a hiring initiative. And so they partner with Disability In. I think, Disability In markets itself because it provides training and HR support. And so some companies may
Mhm.
pay for that, like they pay for affirmative action consultation. We're so used to in the disability world to give away our knowledge for free, that every other sector charges for it. And, so it's different for us, or at least in the United States.
So you have vocational rehabilitation agencies, and they also provide training, consultation, support of recruitment, and Disability In, which is non-profit organization, and they also provide such trainings.
Yeah, I would say Disability In, they don't, they don't do it by client. They don't have a caseload. They never really see a client. They do it in more of a big picture, high level way where, agencies such as mine, we're at that, micro level with working with a client, and, we're looking for a placement today, and maybe, building a relationship or future placements where, Disability In is looking at, bigger picture, statewide, more global initiatives.
Uh-huh.
And
Thank you
then
so
they
much.
kind of bring us in. So if they say, hey, Boeing in St. Louis, or, the last one was, Amazon was building a distribution center in St. Louis. So at that point, we all worked together to fill those positions. It might have been led by Disability In because, they're the larger overseeing, and, when you get down to the provider level, sometimes it can get a little competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Thank you so much
mhm.
for your
Okay.
answer. It's really interesting and important for me because we have something the same in Russia, but
Yeah.
I think our organization and disability inbox in the different direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I tried to find out how it works.